The forest that learned your name. No one in the village of Hollenbrook remembered when the forest first appeared on the maps. The elders claimed it had always been there, a dark green stain spreading across the northern hills. But the oldest documents showed only empty land, where it now stood. No one could explain why the trees grew so close together, their trunks twisted like arthritic fingers, or why birds refused to fly over it. The forest did not have an official name. The villagers simply called it that place. Children were warned about it before they even learned how to read. Hunters refused to enter it. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. But the most disturbing thing was not its silence. It was the rumors. People said if you stepped too far inside, the forest would learn your name. And once it knew your name, it would start calling you back. Elias Weber did not believe in curses or superstitions. He was a surveyor from the city, sent to measure land for a proposed highway extension. When he first saw the forest, he laughed at the warnings. "Trees are trees," he told the anxious mayor. "They don't memorize people." The mayor did not laugh. "Just don't stay after sunset," he replied, "and if you hear someone calling you, even if it sounds like your own mother, you must not answer." Elias promised he would be careful, but he had already decided he would finish his measurements, no matter how long it took. On his first day, he walked only along the outer edge. The trees there were tall but ordinary enough, though their bark was strangely cold to the touch, as if they had never felt sunlight. He noticed something else, too. No insects, no birds, no sound except his own footsteps. The silence pressed against his ears until he found himself talking out loud just to break it. "Just trees," he whispered again. On the second day, he went deeper. The sunlight faded quickly under the canopy. The branches above were so thick they formed a ceiling of knotted wood. His GPS began malfunctioning, its signal spinning wildly. His compass needle trembled like it was afraid. He marked several trees with orange tape to track his path. When he turned back an hour later, the tape was gone. At first he assumed someone had removed it as a prank, but when he looked closely, he saw faint grooves in the bark where the tape had been, as if the tree had slowly swallowed it. That was the first time he felt unease. That night he dreamed of trees standing around his bed, their branches bent low like they were listening to his breathing. In the dream, one of them spoke with dry, cracking voice. "Elias," it said, "we know you now." He woke up sweating and told himself it was just stress. On the third day, he went even deeper. That was when he found the first shoe. It was half buried in the soil, covered in moss. A child's sneaker. Inside it were tiny bones, perfectly clean. He did not report it. Instead, he placed it back where he found it, though he could not explain why. As he continued walking, he began to notice shapes carved into the bark of the trees. At first, he thought they were random scratches. Then he realized they were letters, names, hundreds of them. Some looked centuries old, grown over by layers of bark. Others looked fresh. He traced one with his finger. Matthias Kruger. Beneath it, another, Anna Vogel. Beneath that, dozens more, and then he found one still bleeding sap. Lucas Brandt, 1998. Elias felt the air grow colder. Missing persons, he whispered. He suddenly remembered how many disappearances the mayor had awkwardly avoided discussing. Then he heard it, a voice behind him, soft, familiar. Elias? He froze. The voice sounded exactly like his sister, Clara. She lived hundreds of kilometers away. Elias, where are you? He clenched his fists. Don't answer, he told himself. Don't answer. The voice came again, closer this time. Eli, please. He started running. Branches clawed at his jacket as if trying to hold him. He didn't stop until he burst out of the tree line into open daylight. That evening, he packed his equipment. He told the mayor he had enough data and would leave in the morning. The mayor looked relieved, but not surprised. "Did it speak to you?" he asked quietly. Elias hesitated. Then he nodded. The mayor simply said, "It always starts with someone you love." Elias barely slept. Around 2:13 a.m., he woke to a faint tapping on his window. Tap, tap, tap. At first he thought it was a branch. But his room was on the second floor. There were no trees nearby. The tapping continued. Then he heard his name again, not from outside, from inside the walls. Elias. He covered his ears. Elias. The voice sounded closer now, like it was inside his skull. "You forgot something." He turned on every light in the room. The voice stopped. But when he looked at the wooden wardrobe, he saw something carved into it that had not been there before. Elias Weber. He checked out before sunrise. He did not say goodbye. As he drove away, he promised himself he would forget everything, and for a while he almost did. For 3 weeks he slept normally. For 3 weeks he told himself he had imagined it. Then he began hearing footsteps behind him when walking home at night. Slow, patient, matching his pace. When he stopped, they stopped. When he turned around, no one was there. Then came the smell, damp earth, rotting leaves, pine sap. The smell of the forest followed him everywhere. His apartment plants began to die. Their roots turned black. One morning he woke to find dirt on his floor, leading from his front door to his bed, as if someone with muddy feet had stood watching him sleep. That same day he received a package with no return address. Inside was a strip of orange survey tape. He burned it immediately. That night the smoke smelled like wet bark. Then the dreams returned. This time he was not outside the trees. He was buried among them. He could not move. Roots wrapped around his arms and legs like veins. He tried to scream, but dirt filled his mouth. Above him, faces formed in the bark, hundreds of faces, mouths opening and closing silently, and from all of them at once came a whisper. "Stay." He woke with scratches on his arms, real ones, soil under his fingernails. He stopped sleeping. A week later, he heard Clara's voice again, this time from his phone. He answered before thinking. "Hello?" Silence. Then a faint wooden creaking sound, like trees swaying. Then a whisper. "Come back." The call ended. Clara later confirmed she never called. Elias began researching the land where the forest stood. Old records showed something disturbing. Before the trees, there had been a settlement there in the 1600s, a village erased from history after a winter where everyone reportedly vanished. No bodies found, only their houses left standing, and in the center of the abandoned village, according to one priest's journal, a circle of black saplings growing where the church once stood. The priest wrote one final entry before disappearing himself. The trees repeat our prayers at night, but they say them wrong. Elias tried to ignore it, but then he noticed something on his arm while brushing his teeth one morning, a faint line under his skin, like a splinter, except it moved, slowly, growing, branching. By evening there were several dark lines spreading like roots beneath his flesh. The doctor said it was probably a rare fungal infection. The medication did nothing. The lines kept spreading. Then one morning he woke up and found a word formed by the lines across his forearm. Stay. That was the day he realized he would have to go back. He drove without telling anyone. The mayor looked heartbroken when he saw him. "It called you," he said. Elias nodded. "Can I stop it?" The mayor hesitated too long. Finally, he said, "No one who hears their name escapes forever." Elias entered the forest at noon. He walked without marking his path this time. It did not matter. The forest already knew where he was. The deeper he went, the more the trees seemed to lean inward, watching, listening. He began hearing whispers layered under each other, names, thousands of names, some crying, some laughing, some begging. Then he reached a clearing he had never seen before. In the center stood a massive tree unlike the others. Its trunk was wider than a house. Its bark looked almost like fused human forms. Arms, faces, rib cages, all stretched and blended into wood, and carved into its center, fresh and deep, was his name, Elias Weber. The bark around it was still wet. He touched it. The tree pulsed like a heartbeat. Then the ground behind him shifted. Roots rose like snakes, wrapping around his ankles, his wrists, not tight, just enough to hold him. A voice came from the tree, not loud, not threatening, gentle, like a teacher correcting a child. "You came back." Elias tried to pull free. "What are you?" The tree seemed to consider the question. Then it answered, "We are what remains." Faces emerged slowly from the bark around his name, some skeletal, some fresh, all watching him. One spoke. "It doesn't hurt after a while." Another said, "You forget being alone." Another whispered, "We are never lonely now." Elias screamed and pulled harder. The roots tightened slightly, not to hurt, just to reassure. "Why?" he shouted. "Why do you take people?" The tree answered, "We do not take, we keep." "From what?" The pause lasted a long time. Then, "From being forgotten." The roots began pulling him closer, slowly, patiently. "Every name spoken becomes part of us," the tree continued. "Every memory becomes a ring in our growth." Elias felt bark forming where the roots touched his skin, hardening, merging. "You will not disappear," the voices promised. "You will remain." He thought of Clara, of sunlight, of laughter in cafes, of the ordinary world. "I don't want to remain," he whispered. The tree responded gently, "You already began." The lines under his skin pushed outward, splitting, small wooden growths emerging like thorns. His fingers stiffened. His breath smelled like sap. "Please," he said, "let me go." The tree almost sounded sad. "We cannot unlearn your name." The pulling continued inch by inch. Then something strange happened. Elias remembered the mayor's warning. "If it calls you, do not answer." He realized something important. The forest learned names because people answered, because they confirmed who they were. He looked at his carved name. Then he did the only thing he could think of. "That isn't my name," he said. The roots paused. The whispering faltered. "That is not my name," he repeated louder. "You're wrong." The bark around the letters cracked slightly. The tree spoke again, uncertain now. "You answered to it." "I made a mistake." The roots loosened a fraction. Elias forced himself to continue. "My name isn't Elias Weber." Silence fell across the clearing. Even the thousands of whispers stopped. The tree asked, "Then who are you?" Elias closed his eyes. "No one," he said. For the first time, the roots recoiled, just slightly. Confusion rippled through the voices. "No one?" "No one," he repeated. "You learned the wrong name." The tree pulsed faster. "We do not forget names." "Then forget this one." Cracks spread through the carving. Sap bled like tears. The roots loosened further. Elias collapsed backward, ripping free patches of bark fused to his skin. The voices rose into a chaotic murmur. Error. Mismatch. Uncertain. He crawled backward. The forest seemed to hesitate, like a machine given impossible instructions. When he finally reached the edge of the clearing, the voices returned one last time. "If you have no name, you cannot be called." He did not stop moving until he saw daylight. He never returned to his old life. He never used his real name again. He moved constantly, new cities, new documents, new identities, and it seemed to work. The lines under his skin faded, the smell disappeared, the dreams stopped. Years passed. He almost believed he was free, until one day, while checking into a small roadside motel, the receptionist smiled and said, "Name?" He hesitated, just for a second. Too long. "Sir?" she asked again. Without thinking, without planning, he answered automatically, "Elias." The lights flickered. Somewhere far away, deep under soil and miles of roots, something ancient and patient remembered, and in the silence between heartbeats, a forest whispered with quiet satisfaction. Welcome back. The forest had always been whispered about in the nearby town, but few ever dared to venture inside. Legends spoke of the twisted, blackened trees whose roots seemed to crawl across the earth like fingers, reaching for anything that strayed too close. Emily and her friends had laughed at those stories, thinking them the ramblings of old, lonely locals. They packed their bags for a weekend camping trip, the sun bright above, the air crisp with the scent of pine. At first, everything seemed normal. Birds chirped, a soft wind rustled the leaves, and the forest canopy filtered sunlight in golden patterns across the forest floor. But as they trekked deeper, the light began to dim unnaturally. Shadows stretched in impossible angles, and the wind seemed to whisper, carrying voices just beyond comprehension. "It's probably just the wind," Emily said, forcing a smile, though unease curled in her stomach. Night fell faster than they expected, and soon the familiar sounds of civilization were gone. Their campfire flickered against the darkness, and Emily thought she saw movement in the shadows beyond the firelight. "Probably a deer," Mark muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees groaned and twisted as if alive, and strange shapes flitted at the edge of their vision, disappearing when anyone turned to look directly. Then came the whispers, soft at first, indistinct, like the rustling leaves, but gradually forming words. "Stay, stay, forever." Panic spread among the friends as they realized the forest wasn't just dark, it was aware. They tried to leave, but the path they had come in on seemed gone. Each step they took led them deeper into a labyrinth of gnarled trunks and tangled undergrowth. The receptionist didn't react. She simply typed the name into her computer, handed him a key, and said, "Room 12. But Elias felt it immediately. That same cold pressure in his ears, that same impossible silence, like sound itself was holding its breath. He almost corrected himself, almost said it was a mistake, but fear of looking strange kept him quiet. He took the key and walked to his room. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, but underneath it, something else. Damp wood. He froze. No, he told himself, not possible. Inside the room, everything looked normal. Cheap paintings, a buzzing ceiling light, a bed that looked like it had been replaced sometime in the early 2000s. He locked the door, checked the bathroom, checked under the bed. Nothing. Still, he did not sleep. At around 3:07 a.m., he heard it. A soft, dragging sound outside his door, like something being pulled across carpet. Then 3 slow knocks, not loud, not aggressive, just patient. Knock, knock, knock. He didn't move. His heart beat so hard he thought it might answer for him. Then came a voice from the hallway, soft, dry, familiar. "Elias, we found you." He squeezed his eyes shut. "Do not answer." The handle moved slightly, not opening, just testing, like someone confirming he was really there. Then silence. Morning came. Nothing looked disturbed. He convinced himself he imagined it. He checked out immediately. When he reached his car, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. On the dusty rear window, written with what looked like a finger dragged through moisture, was one word: stay. He drove for hours. No destination, just distance. That night, he stopped at a gas station to buy coffee. The cashier looked at him strangely. "You okay, man?" Elias forced a smile. "Yeah." The cashier hesitated. "Weird question, but were you just outside?" "I just walked in." The cashier frowned. "Huh. Why?" The cashier swallowed. "Because I could swear I saw someone standing behind you at the window a second ago." Elias did not ask more. He left the coffee untouched and drove again. The following days brought small things, manageable things. A wooden splinter appearing on his pillow. Dirt in the seams of his shoes after walking on pavement, the faint sound of creaking branches when he sat in quiet rooms. Then came the reflections. In mirrors, sometimes he thought he saw shapes behind him, vertical shapes, too still to be human. Once, in a dark TV screen, he saw what looked like bark texture across his own face. When he touched his skin, it was normal. But the reflection smiled half a second too late. He stopped looking at mirrors. 1 week later, he woke up unable to move. Sleep paralysis, he thought at first. Then he heard breathing, not his own. Slow, deep, wooden. He moved his eyes sideways. Something stood in the corner of the room, too tall. Its limbs were wrong, long like branches. Its surface cracked like old oak. And where its face should be, dozens of shallow human impressions, like faces trying to push outward from inside the wood. One of them opened its mouth. "You said your name again?" Elias tried to scream. Nothing came out. "That means you are still ours." A splintered hand, lifted slowly, pointed at his chest. "Names are roots." Another face pushed forward. This one looked like a young boy. And roots always find their way back. The thing took one step forward. Its movement sounded like bending timber. Then Elias managed to twitch one finger. The creature stopped instantly. All the faces turned toward that tiny motion. Curious, observing, like scientists. "Resistance," one whispered. "Temporary," another replied. Then, just as slowly as it appeared, the thing stepped backward into the corner, its body flattening into shadow, into darkness, into nothing. Elias gasped and sat up. Morning light filled the room. The corner was empty, but on the wall, pressed into the paint like something had leaned there for a long time, was the faint pattern of bark. That was when he understood something worse than being chased. The forest did not need him to return physically. A part of it had already come with him. He tried desperate solutions. He shaved his head, burned his old clothes, changed languages, speaking only in places where no one knew him. He even tried living without introducing himself at all. For a while it helped. But names are everywhere, ID checks, payments, paperwork. One mistake always happened, and every mistake was like watering a seed. Eventually, he found an old folklorist online who specialized in European forest myths. He used a fake identity to arrange a meeting. The old woman listened carefully. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she asked only one question. "Did the forest ever offer you peace?" Elias hesitated, then quietly said, "Yes." She nodded slowly. "That is how it traps the thoughtful ones." "Can it be stopped?" he asked. She considered. "Forests are not evil like people think. They are collections, archives. They keep what time tries to erase." "That doesn't help me." "No," she agreed, "but this might." She handed him a photocopy of a medieval text. One line was circled. "What has no name cannot be held. What refuses memory cannot be planted." "Forget yourself," she said. "Completely." "How?" Her eyes looked almost apologetic. People who tried usually did not remain themselves afterward. Elias understood. Total anonymity, total disconnection, no past, no identity, no story. He asked, Did any succeed?" She took too long to answer. Finally she said, "One." "What happened to them?" She replied quietly, "No one remembers." He tried anyway. He destroyed old photos, deleted records he could access, stopped contacting Clara to protect her. Each step felt like cutting pieces off his own existence. Months passed. The presence faded again. The sounds stopped. The smells stopped. His skin healed. Hope returned. Then on a cold autumn evening, while walking through a crowded train station, he heard two teenagers arguing behind him. One said casually, "Bro, imagine forgetting your own name." The other laughed. "Then you'd basically be nobody." Nobody. The word hit him like ice water. For a moment he felt relief. Maybe that was the answer. But then he heard something else, very faint, very deep, like roots shifting under continents, a whisper traveling through the bones of the earth. Nobody is still a name. Elias felt something inside his chest sink. That night he dreamed again, not of being trapped, not of being chased, but of standing among the trees willingly, calm. The voices were not threatening. They sounded welcoming. "You are tired," they told him. "You can rest." He almost believed them. He almost stepped forward. Then he noticed something new. New names were appearing in the bark. Modern names. Recent dates. The forest was still growing, still learning, still hungry. He asked the voices in the dream, "Do you ever let anyone go?" The answer came like wind through dead leaves. Why would we release what time will destroy anyway? He woke with tears he didn't remember crying. Years later, far from Hollenbrook, far from any map that showed that forest, a hiker would report something strange in a completely different country. A patch of trees growing too close together. No birds. No insects. Names faintly visible in the bark. Experts would call it coincidence, fungal patterns, psychological projection. But one name would appear there before any missing persons reports. Faint, fresh, as if recently carved. Elias. And beneath it, space left for a last name that the forest was still patiently waiting to confirm. Because forests, unlike humans, have endless time. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces where people absent-mindedly introduce themselves, something ancient still listens, waiting for you to say your name out loud.